The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good evening, listeners, and thrilled to be here with y'all. So, folks, today we have Dr. Mark Syms, and we will be talking about well-being. It's important to understand how our brains work, because here's the thing. If you are doing well, you can perform well. Whether it's in your personal life, in your relationships, how you show up for yourself, or showing up for your clients or for service providers, regardless whether you're in corporate world or you are an entrepreneur. It's important to have that wonderful sense of well-being. And folks, thank you to those who have purchased the books, because profits from our books, some of those, go to entrepreneurs impacted by COVID-19. And like the last time, and every time I ask of you, find that 1 hour of your time every month. I'm not asking even every day or every week. Just every month, and give it to somebody with no strings attached. So our today's guest is Dr. Mark Syms. He's called the hearing loss physician. And he has written a practical guide, Listen Up, that empowers readers to take clear action, dramatically improving their quality of life by specifically guiding us to the best care for hearing loss. And he goes into root causes. So welcome, Mark. How are you?
For having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Looks like, and folks, I did not mention, not only Dr. Mark has cared for thousands of patients, he has also done over 10,000 surgeries over the past 20 years. So let's begin at the beginning, which is, when you were a child, did you know that you were going to become a doctor? Did you have any of your parents as a doctor or somebody who influenced you?
I do come from a medical family. So my father was a physician. My father was a physician. My mother was a nurse. So I definitely came from that pastoral caring background. It was an option to me, but it wasn't where I didn't decide to go into medicine until the latter part of my undergraduate education. But it was always an option in the back of my mind. So it'd be unfair for me to say that wasn't an influence throughout my childhood.
Got it. And was it that, when you were a child and you were playing, did like playing a doctor ever come into equation?
No, not really. Honestly, I mean, I did a lot of stuff, but I wasn't playing doctor. I mean, I think the reason I chose it is because I was trying to figure out in my young adult life how I could have the greatest impact. And I thought by being a physician, that was how I could have the greatest impact.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a very rewarding job and very fulfilling job. So who would you say left a mark on you during your young adult life?
I had my parents and my family, by and large. I had a large family. I was one of 6. So we had a busy household at all times. I had a very nice childhood by description. Nothing's perfect, but it was wonderful. And I grew up pretty much a happy kid who enjoyed life. And I would say that by and large, that was the largest impact on my life in terms of my formative years.
Well, that's pretty good. And as you grew through your career, going to college and all that, what cemented the idea of becoming a physician?
Well, my options I thought were to be an academician or a physician. And I just, I thought, the academic route was not going to enable me to have as much being a university professor. I think it's a wonderful thing. I just was trying to see where I could get the kind of the most in terms of changing people's lives. And I thought that being a physician would. I can tell you, my father loved his job. And he was very passionate about being a physician, and he was really happy being a physician. And so I think that's also modeled behavior. If you know somebody who loves what they do and enjoys it on a day-to-day basis, it makes it a much more attractive thing to do in your life. And I mean, he really loved being a doctor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That definitely makes sense. And as you were going through your residency and experiencing rotations, there's so many different fields. Especially you get exposed to practically all the fields. What made you decide to go into ENT, which is your nose?
Again, following people who are happy. The other influence in my life was I have an older brother who's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And so my father was a cardiologist and my brother was an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And he loved it. He said, you should take a look at it. And so I did a rotation in it. And I was like, wow, this is really great. And there are a lot of reasons. One is you're dealing with multiple systems, at least starting out. So you're dealing with ear, nose, and throat. And there's medical treatment. So not everybody needs surgery. So that's nice as well. So you have long-term relationships. And you take care of newborn babies all the way to extremely elderly people. So you're taking care of people across their whole life spectrum. So that opportunity of the different complexities of disease, different systems, and the different patient, frankly, not just my brother, but when I met other ear, nose, and throat physicians, they were all very happy. And so again, it seems like a good way to kind of figure out what you want to do, see people are happy, and kind of try to do what they're doing.
Definitely. Do you recall any stories where you were up for several nights and just crashed or anything during your residency?
Well, certainly there were many sleepless nights. I am in scrubs right now, but I by and large don't usually wear them on a regular basis, especially outside of the workplace. Just so happens I came right from the workplace to record this, or to appear in this. And the reason is frankly, I lived in them and slept in them for a good period of my early adult life. And so I don't mind them, but it's not what I consider kind of a work outfit that I'm perfectly happy to not be in. Although they are very comfortable, I'm kind of pleased to not have that time when I'm in them. I mean, my first year residency, I was in the hospital, every third night on call. And it was actually before medicine had adopted the 80-hour work week. So I'm not complaining. I would just tell you my work week was substantially longer than 80 hours a week.
Yeah, no, and we hear that during residency, it's almost like the doctors or the young emerging doctors are being groomed. So do you know what's the reasoning behind that? Having so many long hours?
It actually has to do with, for surgeons in particular, getting caseloads, right? So there's a certain number of surgeries you need to do to become proficient. And so unfortunately, that involves a certain amount of time in the hospital to be able to get those number of cases. So I think some of it's that formula, some of it's also, kind of this, it's a guild, right? So the apprentices work longer than the master tradesmen. So I think that has something to do with it as well.
So during that time, there are a lot of young people, especially nowadays, they are finding hard. I've had conversations with a couple of my clients, young ones, who are deciding, where to go. And they're like, oh, with COVID, being a physician is not a rewarding job. And they have had the doubts that, oh, we'll get caught up in this and here and that. What would you say to them? Because just kind of imagine you or somebody who's just, so let's make it a two-part question. One who's thinking to going into medicine and one who is just starting out medicine. And I would like you to transport yourself back And what's that one thing you wish you had known when you were deciding or when you were starting your career?
I think it's something I came to appreciate relatively early, but if you think about it, it is amazing. You take somebody into a room, you might have just barely met them, and they entrust you to tell you perhaps things that they wouldn't tell their family or loved ones that make them very vulnerable with the hopes of you getting them to be better. And that privilege and that trust that people give to you, I mean, it's an amazing thing to be able to participate in. And I'm not saying there aren't, but I'm hard pressed to find other professions where that's really what happens, that they come and they trust with you their inner secrets, with the hopes that they can leave that room either better or on the pathway to being better. And I think that that's really an amazing privilege. And so, yes, I mean, I think the other thing is I don't think there are many occupations or professions or vocations, depending on how you approach it, that doesn't have its certain level of hassles, paperwork, administrative sides. I mean, I wish my life had none of that, but that's not just medicine. That's everywhere. I mean, everybody you meet has those type of responsibilities, and pretty much everybody has to answer to somebody. So those things that some people will talk about, I think it's really concentrating on the physicianhood rather than the administrative and other issues. In terms of COVID, I mean, there's been adversity in medicine. I started medicine right at the around the apex of the HIV/AIDS crisis. Mm-hmm. And so, there were many people dying. You were very, very afraid of a needle stick because at the time it was a death penalty or a death sentence to get infected by and large. Now it's one of those things where, I mean, it's still here and it still exists, but it's a very survivable disease. I mean, very famous people, Magic Johnson has had HIV for many, many decades. And so when you look at it, I believe in innovation. I believe in science. I believe in medicine. So we'll figure this out. And frankly, it's not over, don't get me wrong, but we've figured out a lot. I mean, it is pretty amazing that there is a vaccination available so quickly, and a good percentage of the population has been vaccinated and has some resistance from this being something that maybe takes you to the hospital and you pass away to something where you get, less sick and things like that. So I think you could look at COVID as an amazing, how medicine is amazing, that how much we can accomplish so quickly. And so if people are afraid of it, I tell them to go into infectious disease and vaccine development, because that seems like right now a great place to make a huge impact on society.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really like what you shared, that you're in the room and here's somebody, they've never known you, and they're okay to come and trust you just by the fact that it's your profession, that you're the doctor.
That's doctoring, not filling out forms and pecking on computers. That's doctoring.
Mm-hmm. And that's the key to remember, is to not get just caught up in creating those electronic medical records. Yes, as you mentioned, they're an essential part of what you do. And at the same time, keeping that focus on the patient for which you signed up for, focusing on your why. So that said, what would you say? I'm sure there have been tons and tons of success in your life. If you were to see and reflect back, what is one success that happened in your life, and what did you learn from it?
I would say my family. I have 3 children. I think we have a loving family and relationship. And if I were to tell you anything, I think being an effective parent is a much bigger challenge than being an effective physician.
Yeah. So, of course, parents are always, children don't come with any manual.
No. So when I see a newborn, oftentimes I'll just share my own experience with the parents, and I'll say, look, I'm just going to tell you what my experience was. And I always say, I'm kidding, but I go, despite my best efforts, you cannot kill these things. right? Because I thought we were gonna, like, I mean, there was no instruction manual. We didn't know what we were doing. We kind of figured it out, and despite our best efforts, I mean, obviously we didn't want that to happen, but I thought we were going to. Despite our best efforts, children are incredibly resilient despite parents' incompetence and lack of know-how. And so that's actually one of the wonderful things you can figure out, that, it'll work out, right? A lot of stuff worked out. And I think parenting, especially with a newborn, it's very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. Well, it's they are miracles of life. And at the same time, they can be scary because they're so tiny and
and it's a lot of responsibility.
Yep. So we talked about success, and I don't know anyone so far who has never had any failures. So what would you say one of your favorite failures that has happened to you in life, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I mean, there are many. I mean, I would say, without getting into specifics, we've all had, one of those things, and this isn't to demean or lower it, but, I tell people, especially younger surgeons, that surgery is a contact sport. And what I mean by that is you might get hit while you're playing it, right? And so, we've all had adverse outcomes. I can think of one in particular during my residency. And one of my mentors knew that I was down about it, that there had been a bad outcome. And he pulled me aside and he said, look, these things are going to happen. It's maybe one of a string of these that will happen in your career. He said, it's not whether or not it happens to you, it's what you choose to do to respond to it. And those words still resonate in my head when these things are happening. And it's also something I try to impart to younger clinicians and even to my kids, about adversity will happen. It's just how you really choose to respond to it. And so, one of the things is when things don't go well with the patient, I think, you have to kind of hug it. You have to embrace it and acknowledge it and be open about it. It's very uncomfortable. It's very difficult, but I think it's the right thing to do, rather than kind of not cowering or those types of things. And that's a really hard thing to do, and runs very contrary to being, kind of that person I talked about before, where people come in the room and confide in you. So it's a little bit of both sides. It's a vulnerability, but it's real. I mean, my goal every time is to get a perfect outcome or the best possible outcome. And sometimes that's not always the case. And so, as long as you and your patient in partnership understand that, I think it's a wonderful thing. But it's not easy to get comfortable with that.
Yeah. And as you move through this journey, as you said, that it's a journey where you experience successes, where you experience failures. And the way I see it is they're just life events. Correct. That we are part of it, and how we respond to it makes it either successful or a failure. And the same thing, that failure can be a success if you have learned from it and you equip yourself for the future. So that said,
emotional proverbial pain is when you grow, right? Nobody likes to really put that, but it's those moments of discomfort, moments of sadness or pain that really are the ones that get you to expand. Perpetually seeking comfort, you're not really likely to be growing.
Right. And doing medicine is a hard, long road. There's so many things, like people say, oh yeah, have this X, Y, and Z in 5 minutes, just do 5 minutes every single day, and then things will change. Doing medicine is a long haul.
It is.
And what would you say
that my children, when they complain about their homework, I tell them I had 26 years of training and they're only in 7th or 8th grade. So it seems like they got a lot more to go, and don't worry about it. They got a lot more work ahead.
What would you say were your best resources that helped you along the way?
I think an honest work ethic and a want. I know that sound, but somebody said to me once, in terms of getting through the academics, that there's no substitute for butt time, and that's time on your butt. And so if you want to do this, you've got to do it. And I would tell you, using an economic term, the opportunity costs are high, especially in your young adulthood. There's a lot of, and again, I'm not complaining, I'm just sharing with you anecdotally at this point. There's a whole gap in pop culture that I'm missing, that occurred during my medical training that I just didn't participate in. And now it's almost like retrospective. I was like, oh, I don't remember that TV show, or oh no, I don't remember that song. Just not because I wasn't interested. It just wasn't within my bandwidth to be able to participate in that when I was in the throes and the deeper part of my medical training.
Mm. So what I'm hearing is staying focused on your goal will definitely pull you through things. And because here's the thing, right? As they say, energy flows where focus goes. And if your focus is in 5 different things, I want to do this, I want to do this, your efforts are going to get diluted.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are some people who are gifted with what I would call pluripotentiality, right? So you could be many things, and some of them are able to realize that pluripotentiality. But most people really, the concept of multitasking is a falsehood. People really are pretty good at doing one thing well at a time. And I think if you want to excel, if you want to use the 2,000 hours times 5 years, the 10,000 hours to get good at something, certainly, there are only a few things in life you have an opportunity to be able to dedicate that time to.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding that 10,000 hours for you, perfecting your craft.
Correct.
So, Mark, you mentioned that hearing loss may be an indication of cognitive decline. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so the evidence is emerging to be pretty clear that untreated hearing loss is associated with a higher incidence of memory problems and dementia. So, I mean, there are multiple kind of theories about it, but, probably on the basic level, when you are less socially engaged because you have hearing loss. So what I always tell people is hearing loss is like baseball, but more difficult. What I mean by that, in baseball, you get 3 strikes. In hearing loss, you get 2. And so the example is somebody says something, you say, what? They repeat it again, you say, huh? And then they say, forget it. So 2 strikes, you're out. And so what happens is that is a progressive process. Like your loved ones will say, hey, I'm not going to try to strike up this conversation again with this person because it's too difficult. It's too much work. And that leads to slow progressive social isolation, right? So I say people go from being the life of the party to dreading the party, if that makes sense, because they're just not socially connected. So when your brain is not socially connected, you suffer isolation. You're not as cognitively stimulated. So that's one of the mechanisms of cognitive decline. Probably the other mechanism is what I would say cognitive burden is high. So when people develop hearing loss, typically the hearing loss that people develop, they don't hear the high tones as well as they hear the low tones. So low tones are vowels, high tones are consonants. So I describe it to people like you're continually playing Wheel of Fortune, right? Because in Wheel of Fortune, you can buy the vowels, which never solve the puzzle. The consonants are what solve the puzzle, and you're always guessing them. Well, the other way people compensate for hearing loss, there's 2. One is they use speech reading. So they look at people's face, mouth, and lips, because you can tell the difference between wife and wipe by looking at my lips. And then they use context. So the answer is not, I went to the bank to withdraw honey. The answer is I went to the bank to withdraw money. And so people know it's money, not honey, based on the context. And so when you're doing that to compensate for your hearing loss, that's a lot of cognitive load. And so the thinking is, as you're using your cognitive load, which is going down as you're aging, unfortunately, you are robbing from other processes, normal thought patterns, normal memory, and all of those things. So it's also a cognitive load issue plus a social isolation. Those are some of the more prominent theories, but the evidence is pretty clear that untreated hearing loss is associated with dementia and memory problems. There was a report out of Lancet, which is like the New England Journal of Medicine of the UK, which basically said the most modifiable thing you can do to prevent dementia in your adulthood is to treat your hearing loss. So the evidence is pretty clear that's what people should be doing. The problem is people don't know what they're not hearing. So they don't know that they have hearing loss because they don't hear it.
Yeah, so that's a very important point that you have referenced. And yet, during the annual physical exams, hearing is not checked. And why is that?
Well, so the annual exam is based off of the clinical data, and there unfortunately is not enough clinical data that's been accumulated to justify hearing screening as a part of the annual physical examination. So in some ways, you could look at it as a shortcoming of the hearing research world that we haven't done that research. That determination recently came out in the past year or so. And so I think it really has lit a fire for people to actually do something about it. But that's why I also think there has been an attitude that hearing loss is a normal part of aging. So so is high blood pressure, and so is diabetes. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean we don't treat high blood pressure, and it doesn't mean we don't treat diabetes.
Right. So let's say, since it's not part of the normal, how can patients ask the doctors that I want to have a hearing screening?
Well, I think one of the things is there's a lot of symptoms that people can know. There are surveys online that you can take that kind of indicate that they are. You know, look, if you're turning up your TV on the number, that probably means hearing loss. And frankly, if your loved ones are telling you you have a hearing loss, you're right? I mean, I always ask patients, like, why would your wife tell you that you have a hearing loss? I mean, is she just trying to bust your chops? I mean, the point being is the only reason you tell them is because you love them and it's intervening in your communication. The other thing is in terms of screening, there are actually pretty good apps on smartphones at this point that you can do. And then if you don't, you can go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor or an audiologist and get a hearing screening as well. So there's a lot of different ways, but if you're trying to decrease the amount of investment for you to get, I mean time investment, to get some sort of idea, there are apps to do that, and that would be probably where I'd start. But look, if somebody's telling you of hearing loss, that you probably do. I mean, on the flip side, I will tell you somebody I knew very well. His wife sent him for a hearing test because she said he couldn't hear, and his hearing was normal. So there is a difference between listening to people and hearing people. So he heard well, he just didn't listen.
Yeah, no, that's like you said, on the flip side. You mentioned a couple of apps. And do you have any apps that you can reference?
No, I mean, I don't, quite honestly. I mean, if you just do hearing screening and Google it, they're going to tell you what the time. I mean, there are a lot of them. So there's no shortage of them. And so I don't have one in particular. I mean, I've played with them. And so, you know, I don't think people are going to go wrong, because what you're really looking for is an app that would be predictive. If you have hearing loss, it would indicate you do. Mm-hmm. What you really don't want it to do is, if you have hearing loss, to say you don't. And so right. That's not a very hard thing to make the determination of.
Absolutely. So looks like you gotta keep on reading and stay abreast of the trends and research that comes out. So how do you continue learning, or what resources are you using to stay on top of things?
Well, you know, so there are a couple things. One is honestly, for me, my greatest place I learn is from my patients, from having conversations and learning from them. Some of them are really go pretty deep in it, but also they help me to understand the patient side of this process, not the clinical side. There are journals that come. And then the other thing I do is I actually have a podcast called Listen Up. And it's about just like the book. And the beauty is I bring people from all the time. So if there's like a topic I'm interested in, I just have the people on, and then we have a conversation about it. So it's actually, I was talking to a guy recently, without getting into it, all cochlear implants are electrically oriented. They stimulate through electricity, and he's developing a cochlear implant that does both electric and light stimulation. So just absolutely fascinating stuff. In terms of these developments, that's probably quite some time off, but just knowing that that's there and understanding that concept, it's really great. So talking to people, and then, you know, you go to meetings, things like that. But I find the one-on-one conversation like we're having to be much more fruitful than kind of the bigger group conversations.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, because think about it. You have years of experience, and I'm sitting here and I've learned so much in the time we have spent together. So talking to people and listening, it really helps you grow. And you also share that there is a rise in the loss of teenage hearing.
There is. And so because people are using, you know, direct-to-ear headsets, you know, AirPods, and there's an increased amount of sound exposure. And so it's about 1 in 5 people in their early 20s will have a measurable hearing loss. And so that becomes an issue in and of itself. That doesn't mean, you know, people need to take a break every 60 minutes. They should take 5 minutes off to let their ears rest, because they actually do recover with rest. And the second thing is, I would say you shouldn't play them more than about 60% of their maximum. And then the last thing is, a good test is if you can't have a normal conversation with somebody 3 feet away from you, then whatever you're listening to is too loud.
Yeah, and that's definitely good to know about having that 5 minutes of rest between an hour.
Yeah.
And so how can people prevent hearing loss and then prevent dementia? What is the relationship between the two?
Well, I mean, from a hearing loss point of view, you need to know you have it, right? So as you were talking about screening and diagnosis, and then you need to have it well treated. And so, one of the other things that's, I touch on somewhat in the book is, unfortunately, even those people who have gotten treatment aren't always well treated. So here are the statistics. 20% of people have a treatable hearing loss, get them treated. Of them, only a third are appropriately fitted and treated. So it means we have an 8% effective treatment rate. So there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, one of the problems is people think because they have hearing aids, their hearing loss is well treated. And that's actually typically, unfortunately, not the case. And so there are ways that your hearing treatment can be validated to ensure that you're getting the right treatment for you with your hearing technology.
Yeah, no, definitely good points. So tell me, you have talked about you're very much into your patients and talking to them, understanding where they're coming from, where they're at. So do you have a story where a patient touched your heart?
I'm actually pretty blessed because, people really, I mean, even today, I saw a patient, he's had 2 pairs of hearing aids. He has a substantial hearing loss, and he really couldn't understand why he wasn't hearing well. And as I explained to him that it's likely that he has the wrong hearing aids, that the wrong physical configuration, with the wrong programming in it, and explained to him about all that, you could just tell like a light went off in his head. Like, wow, now I finally get why I've been suffering for so long. So for him, it's very frustrating, right? Because he invested his own money to get his hearing loss treated, but it wasn't well treated. And the feedback he was getting from his family and his wife was, you're not hearing that well. And his experience was, I'm not hearing that well. And so, to kind of get that reaffirmation, and then most importantly, to be given a pathway forward of how to treat that, I mean, that's golden. And so honestly, I'm lucky to have that happen multiple times a week. That's why, frankly, I love my job. I have a great job, or occupation or vocation. I would say I really have a vocation. Right? So I am a doctor. I don't do doctor, if that makes sense.
Right. Now, that's very profound. So let's say if you had maybe $50 million, $75 million to just kind of go and spend on anything health related in your field, and there was no red tape. You could spend whichever way you wanted to. What would you spend on?
I think I spend it on awareness and education. So there's really two groups that need to be better educated. And so actually my book targets those 2 groups. People always ask me, what's my audience? So it's one is patients, right? Maybe 3 groups. Patients, for loved one and family, and then my physician colleagues, especially my primary care physician colleagues. And they could all use to have more information, have more awareness, and kind of get hearing loss on the radar. And so to me, educational materials, I mean, people want to do well for other people. They just need the tools and the knowledge to be able to do that.
Right. And since you have written a book, I'm assuming you're doing it through that as well.
Yeah. And actually that's why I wrote the book. I didn't aspire to be an author. Like, it wasn't like, oh, my bucket list is to write a book. The thing was, I kept on saying these things and educating patients in my exam room. And I was like, well, one, if I give them the book as they were coming out, I would give them a reference. And 2, I was like, the way I can increase my magnitude of impact is to not only, if you look at my numbers, I can see about 2,000 new patients a year. Let's say I have 15 to 20 more years of practice. So I'm looking at somewhere between 30 and 40,000 patients I can impact. Well, with a book, if other people read it, I can impact orders of magnitude more people with the book. And that's actually why I wrote books. I was like, well, I can take it beyond me. And so a patient actually said to me, you should write this all down and write a book. I was like, yeah, that's a really good idea. So, but as I will tell anybody who's written a book or has thinks about writing a book, it's easy for somebody to tell you to go write a book. It's a decent amount of work to actually write a book.
Oh, I can definitely concur with that. Having written 15 books myself and having helped others publish their books. Yeah, and that's again the thing. It's a journey. And as you talked about that, hey, as your kids are talking about, oh, this homework and that homework, you gotta put in that investment of your time, resources, and efforts and energy to
well, in a book, you
reach
don't
the
even think about
mastery.
it, like just the cover, right? Getting somebody to help you do a cover, right? If you want it to be meaningful, right? And so, you know, there's more. It's not just writing a book; it's getting a cover, writing a book, getting it edited, getting the copy edited, getting it formatted, getting. I mean, it's. And I'm not saying it's bad. It's just it's more formidable than I thought when I was like, well, I'll just write a book, right? It's kind of, which is like most things in life, right? You think it's easy, but then when you actually break down the steps, it's much more challenging, which is actually kind of makes it fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say if, I don't know if there is or not, but would you say there is one myth about your profession or your field that you'd like to debunk?
Yeah, that hearing loss is a normal part of aging. It's not, and it's not something people have to accept, and it's something that's highly treatable, and it's a worthwhile thing to treat. So if you treat your hearing loss effectively, you connect better with your loved ones and friends, and you can remain independent. I mean, the thing is, you know, when you think about, I mean, my parents have passed away, but when you think about your parents aging or you aging, you know, one of the things that your children are looking at is, you know, is mom or dad able to kind of keep up, or are they losing a step, or are they not as sharp as they want? And those are the beginnings of the thinking of you're going to lose your independence. And so sometimes it's as simple as hearing loss. So if you want to maintain your independence, treat your hearing loss, because if you can answer your kids correctly and answer your friends correctly, people think you're still with it. And if you can't, they don't think you're with it. So it's a huge part of remaining independent.
And let's say once somebody finds out they have a hearing loss, what would be the next steps to take?
Well, so I mean, probably the big message of the book and my kind of philosophy is there's a difference between getting hearing aids and getting your hearing loss treated. So by simple analogy, there's a difference between dumping bricks and mortar in your backyard and getting a brick wall built. And so fundamentally, if you're going to get a brick wall built in your backyard, you need bricks, you need mortar, but what you really need is a very skilled mason. And so when people get hearing aids, they get the objects called hearing aids, put them in their ear. When you're going to get your hearing loss treated, you really need to find a care provider who's going to help you treat your hearing loss effectively. And so that's one of the big differences. I mean, people think getting your hearing loss treated is buying the commodity called hearing aids. So I always tell people, if you're going to do that, go buy the hearing aids at the same place you buy meat, trash bags, and toilet paper. And on your way out, pick up a flat screen TV, because that's the concept you're using. But that's not really what you need to get your hearing loss well treated.
Oh, definitely good points. I like what you said about Mason, going to the person who is an expert, going to the person who has probably done that not only once, twice, but several times before. So many times what happens is that, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, craftsmanship matters. That's all. I mean, you know, in anything, right? You know, that's why you can get 3 bids to do home repair. And, you know, most people are homeowners have maybe taken the middle bid, and then you have to hire the more expensive person to come back and fix the bad work of the less expensive person. We've all been through that. And that's because your difference is the skill of the person who's providing you with the service. And it's the same with your hearing care.
Well, nowadays there are reviews, and yet there are not that many reviews for doctors. Sometimes, you know, people are looking for their care providers who they think like has the skill, and at the same time, who's going to be with them every step of the way. What's a good way of going about finding that right care provider?
Probably word of mouth. I mean, you know, people who have, you know, been satisfied and gotten good care will usually, I mean, I think word of mouth really matters. And, you know, I think there has to be a level of comfort, right? People kind of mesh. And, you know, I tend to mesh with most patients, but, you know, there are people who come see me who didn't get along with somebody else. And there are probably people who saw me who get along better with somebody else too. Not everybody's going to be a perfect match. So you should find somebody who really matches and feels comfortable with you. And you feel comfortable with it.
Definitely. Really good points. So let's say if you were to put yourself in my shoes, what else would you have asked yourself?
I think we've covered kind of the basics in it. I think that, there's not a lot except for, kind of getting more granular in terms of treating your hearing loss. One of the things I ask people on my podcast is I'll ask them, what's your favorite sound? So what's your favorite sound?
So are you asking me or are you asking yourself?
I'm asking you. So what's your favorite sound? Because it matters, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Wind going through leaves, water crashing at the beach. So you or anybody listening should imagine what their favorite sound is. For me, it's laughter, right? So then I guess the question is imagine if that wasn't part of your life, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about, right? Like, what are those sounds? What are those things that you take such joy in, right? And if those things start to disappear, it seems like a huge part of the joy of life. I mean, you and I couldn't have this conversation if both of us or one of us had a significant hearing loss. It would be substantially more difficult.
Yeah, no, definitely great point, because there's so many different sounds that I like. It could be from the ocean, just walking on the beach, and listening to the gentle waves when it's low tide, or a little bit of more gushing of waves when it's high tide, or just hearing the breeze or music. There's so many things that we can be grateful for.
Yeah, and those things slowly go away, right? Yeah. And so there are people who get their hearing loss treated, they go, I forgot what birds sounded like. I mean, so that's, and so the worst part is you don't know what you don't hear. So it slowly goes away, and it just becomes not part of your life. Not, that I don't have that anymore. It just kind of fades away, which I think is a pretty insidious disease.
Right.
It's really, really profoundly affects people.
It does. So how can our listeners get in touch with you?
You can go to www.listenuphearing.com. So it's the book, listenuphearing.com. You can contact me there. You can get the book there as well. The book's also available on Amazon. So that would be the best way to get a hold of it.
And let's say if people were in your area and they wanted to get started with you.
My clinical practice is Arizona Hearing Center. So it's www.azhear.com. or 602-307-9919. So azhear.com or 602-307-9919, and they can get a hold of my office. I'm pretty easy to find. I mean, I'm not hiding anywhere.
And would you like to leave our listeners with a couple of tips that they can go and implement straight away in their lives?
Sure. I think if people are exposed to loud noises, they should protect themselves. I would always recommend, especially with incredibly loud noises, to use both earplugs and muffs. I see, unfortunately, a lot of ear injuries from loud noises. The other comment I would say is you can't get hearing back that you've lost. And then the last comment I'd say is the time that you should treat your hearing loss is yesterday. Everybody wants to delay, but you should enjoy the fruits of treating a hearing loss as soon as yesterday, because I have a ton of patients who say, boy, I wish I'd done this sooner because I missed out on so much.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for spending your time with us. Enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Listeners, thank you for joining us. It's always wonderful to be with you on Monday evenings. So take that step and make sure that you are watching out for your hearing if you have not done so before. And thank you, Rebel, for making the show possible. Until next time, be powerful and take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week, Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time.